Welcome to DubLife Diaries, the podcast where passion meets the open road. I'm Joe Person, your host, and also a lifelong dubber. Buckle up, because this ride is just beginning. This podcast is sponsored by Volksmania Magazine. Good times, great cars, awesome Volksmaniacs. Visit Volksmania.com to learn more about this class-leading VW magazine. All right, welcome back to DubLife Diaries. We are sitting down tonight with one of the most fascinating minds in the entire air-cooled world. The man behind the myth, the inventor, the engine whisperer himself, Mr. Jake Raby. From a teenage kid wrenching engines in a tiny Georgia shop to becoming the guy who literally saved an entire generation of Porsche motors with his patented IMS solution, Jake's story is one of obsession, precision, and pure American grit. He's a Marine. He's a trained perfectionist who builds every single engine by hand, deep in the North Georgia mountains, with no clocks, no deadlines, just mastery. He's the National Tech Director for the Vintage Volkswagen Club of America. This dude is so awesome, guys. Buckle up, because today we are not just talking horsepower. We're talking legacy, purpose, and what it really means to dare to be different. Jake Raby, welcome to DubLife Diaries.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on here. I like this. I like what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Before we get going tonight, I do want to just give a quick shout out to some of my sponsors. But before any of that, I got to do this. I got to thank you for your service. I noticed that you're a Marine. I know it comes with, but I really appreciate my freedom. So thank you so much for your service to this country.
And that's always as a Marine and just as a service member, it's always hard to answer that. Like, we really appreciate it, but what's our answer? Is it like, my pleasure? I mean, even though a lot of it wasn't fun, but a lot of it was, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for being a Marine. But the United States Marine Corps will celebrate its 250th birthday on November 10th. So, yeah, just a few days from now. So, actually, the Marine Corps ball's tomorrow night. So, yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, my pleasure, I guess, is the way that I can answer that best.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, also, quick shout out to Volksmania Magazine. I feel these guys are the flyest VW magazine on the face of the planet. Shout out to issue number 24, hitting the shelves here real soon. The podcast has a couple features in it where we feature some previous guests. Volksmania.com. Use DubLife10 at checkout. Shout out to Salty Dub from the beach to the bay. Salty Dub is tearing up the coastal VW scene. Really cool events and some really cool swag. SaltyDub.com. Same discount code applies. DubLife10. If you use that, you'll get 10% off of your merch purchase. I'm super excited because this is going to be DubLife Diaries' first two-part podcast. When I had reached out to Jake and, we started talking some details, I told him, we could take 90 minutes. He said, dude, 90 minutes ain't going to be enough for this. And and sent me all kinds of really cool stuff. So I'll touch on what the second part, what we'll touch on. But this time, I'm super excited, man. We got so much to talk about. So back to you, man. Your story sounds like something that comes straight out of a movie. I'm grateful that you're taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy guy. Let's talk about growing up in Cleveland, Georgia. What was it like, I guess, growing up in a town where there's only 2 traffic lights?
Well, yeah, it's changed a lot, obviously. I mean, back then, it was just Appalachia, it just was. And, basically you did 3 things. You either worked on worked at or lived on a chicken farm. You worked at a textile mill, or your family made moonshine. That was it, right? And so my family ended up with the moonshine and the textile mill. Chicken farm was a little bit later, because my original shop property, which is at Raby Drive, was my grandfather's poultry farm. So I got all three of those. I got the chicken farm, which actually he raised turkeys. I got the textile because my mom worked there for 20 years. And then my grandfather never had a job. Everything he did was basically illegal. And, but he started the very first drive-in theater in the state of Georgia, named after my mom. He started the first skating rink in the state of Georgia, named after my mom, both of which were money laundering efforts. So,
Dang, man.
but he everything was about getting the money back into circulation. But he was never, really talks about in this area in the Northeast Georgia mountains and all over the South pretty much, but especially in the mountains, people running liquor, the guys driving the cars. So Dawsonville, Georgia's just down the road where the Elliots were from and all that. And everybody was all linked together. The Dixie Mafia was a few miles away and all the bad stuff that happened with that. But my grandfather, he didn't run the liquor. He was the chemist. He was the guy that the University of Georgia came to in the 60s and said, we can't make an ethanol still work. So we need you to show us how to do it. So he charged them $10,000 back, I think it was 68, to make an ethanol still. And when they give him a check, he said, what's that? And they said, well, we're paying you. Nope, I work for cash, because he couldn't take it to the bank. So, but that's what it was like. I mean, it was totally Appalachia. The only plumber in town was a drunk. He didn't have a phone number. There was no phone. He didn't have a driver's license. So if you needed your plumbing fixed, you better be at his house at daylight to pick him up before anybody else.
Wow.
And then you took him. He did your plumbing work. Usually, you give him a 6-pack of beer as payment. And then when you go to take him home, there's somebody else waiting in the front yard that needs their plumbing work done because they had to wait on him to get home. So when people ask me, they're like, how the world do you learn all the stuff that you've learned? I said, I didn't have a choice, right? I mean, totally. There was nobody to call. If wiring needed to be done, you did it. The car broke, you needed to fix it yourself. When you pay a guy to take your tractor apart and rebuild the engine, he can't put it back together. So I had to do it when I was 15 with no book and no torque specs. So that's what it was like. I mean, basically, it was, but you didn't know that it was kind of rough like that,
Right. Well, not when you're a kid, for sure.
We had wood
life.
heat. We had wood heat, and I had this old potbelly heater in my shop, which we'll talk a little bit about that. But it would take you all your time, cutting and splitting firewood to make a fire in the shop, and then there's no insulation in the shop. So basically the fire is just, you've got a heater in there and you're constantly walking over, warming your hands and your feet up because you're freezing while you're working. So it was always a crazy thing, like especially having old Volkswagens, the heat always sucked, right? So it still amazes me today when I get in a car and it has good heat. So
Well, I saw something in your background and in your past that was kind of like mine, and that was that you had your first paying job around 13, and I did too. Mine wasn't building engines though; it was Winn-Dixie. I got a job at the Beef People bagging groceries when I was 13, but I noticed that you did too. What do you remember about the first engines that you worked on at such a young age?
Well, and that was my first paying customer for an engine. So,
That wasn't your first. Okay.
No, and honestly, really, I've never had an official job. In my life, because I've always worked for myself. I like to say I've always signed the paycheck on the front side. But I worked at a local import shop where we did all kinds of stuff, Volvos and Volkswagens and Porsches. And, back then in the 80s, every town had its own little import shop a lot of times. And that import shop would have their own parts store because, they had to, right? There was no mail order or anything. If they were going to work on those cars, they had to have parts. So I went to this local place and I worked there for several years, but I never collected a paycheck because I told my boss, I just want parts. So I would trade my labor for parts and I would take the parts home and use them to build my own engines and work on customers' cars. So 13 years old in this barn, Porsche 914. I'd done some engines before that, and we can go into how I started this really when I was like 8 years old. And my dad was not a mechanic, but basically I had this situation where this guy needed a 914 engine put back together. Somebody had taken apart, And I'm like, well, that looks just like a Volkswagen engine. So I took it apart and put it back together again and charged the guy $100, and I thought that was a big deal. And I thought it was a big deal when I had like a milk crate full of extra parts, like ignition coil and this and that. And then I ended up with like 80 cars, when I was 18. So but how far back do you want to go? Because the story it progresses. But yeah, that was my first paying job for an engine. I won't call it a build, even though it kind of was, but it was what we call a trunk job, where the whole engine comes to you in the trunk of the car, right? And you got to put it back together again. So
Right on.
somebody took it apart, they couldn't put it back together again. A guy couldn't find anybody to do it. The import shop didn't want to do it because they didn't want to build engines. So I took it home with me. And that's pretty much what started all of it. And at that time, my dad was a banker. So he wanted to teach me about business. You're in business now, son. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, you've had your first paying job. So we go down to the bank and we open up a business checking account. He's on there with me because I'm only 13 years old. And believe it or not, I still had the same account number until 2 years ago. The same account. The bank has changed hands all these times.
Wow.
My account existed, and they sold out again, and they finally changed the account number. But that was literally there for since 1990, before 1990, actually. How far back do you want to go? Because I can tell you all kinds of crazy stuff about lawnmowers that led to Volkswagens being purchased. So
Let's talk about the role of maybe the small town life shaping your focus and your discipline. Obviously, the Marines did a lot here too, but do you attest any of this focus of this discipline in your life to growing up in a small town like that?
yeah, a lot, most everything, because that discipline of there's no calling for help. There's nobody who you going to call. So you get this type of atmosphere. When you're in that type of atmosphere, everything it's all on you. In the 80s in Appalachia, there was nothing around. I mean, the doctor that we had, the last time I saw him, I went to see him in the tack room of his barn, and he had all the records in shoe boxes, a 20 gauge shotgun sitting in the corner. And when you get an immunization from him, he pulls out his desk drawer and draws it out of that's what I'm talking. That's the level that I'm talking about. Like it would be. And it was funny. I had a friend here from Australia one time, and I had to go to the doctor, and I took him with me. He goes, "This looks like something out of a Western movie. You've got to be kidding me. The doctor's working in a horse barn. There's horses in the barn, right?" But yeah, that small town, everybody takes care of each other. Everybody knows each other. Everybody supports each other. Everybody helps each other. That is what formed me. And that's why I still stay here, right?
Right.
I mean, as a Marine, I was in Southern California. And I met a lot of people, and a lot of the people that I met, I still interface with today, and the connections that I got 30 years ago, I still use those. But yeah, I would say the discipline of having to do things yourself, not having a lifeline, not having anybody else to do anything. And realistically, that's just the way you think life's supposed to be, right? You don't realize that there's people that have other people do things for them. You don't realize that you can call and order something, or you can call and get something. You just don't know that. So I think that people today look at it like it's ignorance. I mean, to me, I really appreciate that, right? I really appreciate just having to learn how to do everything yourself, and in that way, you know what to do. And I use it every day. The things that I learned as a kid, I mean, I was using skills today that I remember learning the first time in 7th grade. So
That's crazy. But let's fast forward a little bit then. Talk to me about how the Marines influenced not just your discipline or your focus, but really the mechanical mindset as well. Because you said your dad wasn't even a mechanic, right?
no, but like we're going to talk about, my grandfather on my dad's side was kind of the mastermind of that. He was literally an electrical engineer at the turn of the 20th century. But then my grandfather on my mom's side, he was the one that made moonshine. He was basically a chemist with what the guy learned how to do and how he was able to do all these different things. He could do anything. He didn't do anything well. He did everything okay.
Yeah.
But he was everything from a farmer to making moonshine. I mean, owning businesses. I could sit here and have a whole podcast about the crazy stuff he did. But I mean, ultimately, the Marine Corps took all that and brought it together. And I will tell you, the night that I graduated from high school, everybody else is going off on a trip or whatever. My recruiter's in the parking lot. Okay. I got my diploma. I didn't even go back to my seat. I walked straight out, shook my dad's hand at the field house on the football field, got in the recruiter's car. He took me to Athens, Georgia. I got on a regional plane, flew to Savannah, and went straight
Dang.
to Paris Island.
They were
And I
waiting
had
on you,
to.
brother. They were waiting on you.
Well, they were, because I was going to be, I got a guarantee contract for aviation maintenance. But those schools are only set up at certain times. And that's the thing about being a Marine. There's not a lot of us, right? So it's not like there's big cycles of this stuff. So I literally had to leave that day and start boot camp the next day, or I was going to miss it for like 8 months till they did another cycle. So that's what I did. So everybody's going on senior trips, and I'm at Paris Island, right? Knowing how I grew up, that was to be expected. But pretty much my dad was really the driving factor behind that. My mom passed away in 1990. She had lung cancer, and I was just a kid, and so he had worked at a prison after he retired from the banking world, and he's like, I don't want you going to jail. I don't want you to be a convict like all these people that don't have any direction in their life. So the first day of my senior year, I came home from school and I sat down, and he sat down, and he's like, so what are you going to do? I said, well, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm the one asking the questions here. What are you going to do? And I said, well, about what? He said, what are you going to do? And then he followed that up with, I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to lay up in my house and be lazy. If you stay here after you get out of school, you're going to be in college full-time, tech school full-time. You're going to be working full-time. Whatever you're going to do is going to be full-time. And if you stay in your bedroom, it's going to be a $5,000 deposit and $1,000 a month just to rent the bedroom. And I said, okay, because my dad was drafted in Korea. And I said, well, maybe I'll join the Marine Corps. He says, you can't do it. So he knew the quickest way to make sure that I would do it was to say that I couldn't do it. So I said, okay, well, ironically, 2 days later, the recruiter is standing right next to the library as everybody's walking by, going to lunch, and he picks me out. He's like, hey, because I had shop classes almost all day long. The school system gave up on me, right? I was in special ed because they didn't know what to do with me, and they just put me in shop classes all day. So
they don't even have those anymore.
Oh no! If I was in school today, I'd be completely screwed. But at the end of the day, I was walking by, and I've been in machining class. I've got chips all over me. I mean, I've been working in a shop all day. He picked me out. He's like, hey, I see you like to work on stuff. I'm like, yeah, how'd you guess? He's like, you want to work on helicopters? I said, yeah. I said, I was already talking about going to the Marine Corps anyway. I met him after school, and he's like, hey, this is what we can do. We can put you in this and blah, blah, blah. And your ASVAB scores are great. And you aced this and you aced that. You can do anything in the Marine Corps you want except for be an interpreter or be an air traffic controller. I'm like, well, that's fine. I don't want to do either one of those. I said, I want to be an aircraft mechanic. So that's how that all ended up. So I went home and I told my dad, I was like, hey, I'm going to Atlanta, going down to MEPS to have my exam or whatever to go in the Marine Corps. He's like, okay, I'll bleep when I see it. Right. So I went down and got sworn in and brought the packet back. He's like, okay, I guess we'll see if this works out. And so I packed up that day and left and went straight to Paris Island. But to get back to your question, what the Marine Corps did was bring all that together, right? It took all the stuff that I had learned and the disciplines that my grandparents, my dad had instilled into me, and my mom had incredible work ethic, just incredible. She ran a dry cleaners and a tailor shop at a military academy, and she worked nonstop. So it's always been in my blood, but ultimately it just brought all that together. If I had to say, the main thing that it did is it gave me more pride in what I did, Because, if you look back at me when I was 15, 16, 18 years old, the shop that I had, which was just a chicken house, but, my dad gave me a concrete floor for it when I was 14, but it was a disaster. There was tools and piles of stuff laying everywhere and car batteries and gas in the corner. And it was just it was destroyed. I've even got some pictures of it. It was just a destroyed shop. Now, as a Marine, you learn everything has got to be absolutely perfect all the time. I can't function if I don't know where things are. Like, it drives me crazy if I don't have it memorized where every tool is loaded in the tool changer or Baha's machine. I just, and that is what I never would have had it not been for what the Marine Corps taught me. That crazy level of attention to detail through rifle inspections and uniform inspections and all that sort of thing. And I'll say, after I graduated from boot camp, I've never done anything hard in my life. I mean, that's the hardest thing you can do. So after I passed that company commander's inspection and, got a Eagle Globe and Anchor put in my hand, I mean, nothing's a challenge after that anymore, ultimately. Everything else, when you look at an adversary or something, or somebody decides they want to be a competitor, you look at them like, are you kidding me? You want to fight? You really want to fight? Okay. I don't think you do, but we'll see. you know?
Now, on this
Um,
note, right where we're at, I know you talk a lot about getting in the zone, and I want to know what that really looks like for you. What is getting in the zone? Because combat trained Marine, obviously very accomplished in what you do professionally. What is getting in the zone to Jake Raby?
Man, I tell you, it means you don't take a lunch break. It means that, you don't go home when you're tired, you go home when you're done. It means if you stay up for 2 days straight, you stay up for 2 days straight. It means that when you've got a long-term employee that you can trust to go buy your groceries and you don't wanna leave the shop compound, that you send her down and say, "Here's my list, go buy my groceries." So, that is the zone, right? And people are like, "I wanna stop by your shop." Sorry, I mean, no offense, but I don't wanna see you. I'm in the zone, right? So, I mean, that to me is what it is. Now, my wife knows when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. You may as well not even tell me to do anything, ask me to do anything. And I've been in the zone a lot in the last couple of years, but more than any other time as I've had to learn to make my own stuff and run this other equipment that I've never ran before and learn a lot of disciplines and things that are a little different than I ever needed. But to me, that's the zone. It truly is, working with no radio, working with no television,
Lot.
I see people that have like a television in their engine build room. And I said, No, that better not get turned on, right? Because I've got to be in that world. But some people can't work without background noise. They got to have a radio or whatever. So everybody gets in the zone differently. But to me, it's just complete quietness. But I will say, sometimes I want a little bit of background noise because one thing the Marine Corps did leave me with is this crazy ringing in my ears from too many jet engines, right? So too many jet engines, machine guns, race cars, and grenades, as I like to say.
Yeah. Wow. That's dang, man. Now, something I noticed on your website that I thought was such a kind of a quality vibe to possess, but also how do you do it? And that is no clocks, no calendars, only creation in the shop. Talk to me about that for a second. Why does slow craftsmanship beat speed every time?
Well, haste makes waste every time. And I tell people, you can't rush success. You can only rush failure. And I see this all the time in people that are out there that have a show car or a race car. Listen to what I'm about to say. When we used to race, my rule was, and my wife's got 5 land speed records that still stand today. She's set in a Porsche 996. My rule was that we did not go race unless that car was in that trailer and the door was closed the Saturday before we were supposed to leave for the race. So to me, if we didn't do that, we had already beaten ourselves. So the people that show up and they're working all night long and they're thrashing and all this, they forget and leave something loose. That's where some of those disciplines from the Marine Corps comes in from the aviation side. And I'm like, I've seen people die because of a loose bolt. We're not going there. So that's where that whole discipline comes from. of nope, we're not going to the track unless this thing was done. Otherwise, we're going to beat ourselves. So, no clocks and no calendars is completely kind of, for lack of a better term, ass backwards from the rest of the world.
Right. Well, I'm bringing
Because
it up.
because today everything's about how quick can I get it
That's
done?
right.
How
That's right.
long does this take?
That's
I don't even know. Today, like the trash comes on Thursdays. I had to ask my wife this morning, "Hey, is what day is it?" I don't even know because I'm in the zone.
yeah.
So ultimately, I think that to me, that's what drives quality. And the thing is, there's very few craftsmen left. And I think most of them are like in the custom cabinetry world. And anybody that I know that possesses my same level of kind of craziness is usually a custom cabinet guy because they do things from scratch. And I like to do things from scratch. And they have that discipline, and you never get them in a rush. The other people that do that are taxidermists. Taxidermists, I like to hunt, and I've got like 8 animals at a taxidermy right now. And I never rush the guy. It doesn't do any good because he's
Yeah.
an artist. This is where artistry comes into and meshes with and mixes with the mechanical side of things because it truly is art. I mean, and so I don't even keep track of how long it takes me to build an engine. I think it's about 130 hours. I don't even know. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's
I saw that on your company's website. I saw that, don't try to, give a time constraint or something, because we're gonna work till it's finished, and whatever time that takes, it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's where one thing I'll say the Marine Corps instilled in me too, and my dad also, is, if you have a standard, it's uncompromising, right? People will say, well, so and so they do this cheaper. Okay, fine, go over there. I got plenty of work, right? I don't need every job. I don't want every job. If they want to say that they have a confusingly similar thing that they kind of copied from me or whatever at some point, or copied from other people, and they can do it quicker, well, maybe they'll be better for you. I truly believe that all of us, there's enough work for everybody out there, and
I
and
agree
other
with you.
people, and as you get further in this industry, people will target you. So I walk around every day with a target on my back, but I love it because that means I'm in the other guy's mind 24/7, 365. I'm living there rent free. So because of course, as a Marine, it's my job to create stress for everybody else around me. That's what eliminates my stress. But
Yes.
no, ultimately, I think that's the no clocks and no calendars thing. And I will say, if every now and then somebody will say, "Well, why is it taking so long?" And you know, even though I don't give people an absolute time I'm going to be done, I give myself a bit of a guidance point, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to have it done in this window, and I get it done in that window because even in COVID, I only missed a couple of dates while everybody else is a year off and they're making excuses. We only missed things by maybe a couple of weeks, but it's as I do more and more specialized work and the jobs get more and more crazy and I make more and more of my parts and I'm able to share that with somebody. I'm like, hey, I'm literally making your oil sump right now. Here's your oil sump. Like it's in my machine. This is yours. I put your name in it, right? And they're like blown away because nobody else is going to do that because I like it to be mine. I like to say, I modeled the part, programmed the part, I put the tools in the machine, I hit go, I clean the burrs off the pieces, and then I put those pieces together, and then I put the engine together, and then I put it on the dyno, and then I tune it, and I did every part of it from A to Z. And that is what I've been going for 35 years.
Dang, man. I mean, well, that's how you do it. So when did the Type 4 obsession start for you in your life?
Well, if you go back, you remember what I said about putting that engine together when I was 13 for a 914. Now, I will be very honest with you and say, and a lot of people that have known me for a long time will absolutely say this is true. I did not used to like the Type 4. I didn't. When I first started this stuff, it was all Type 1 based. The first performance engines I built were Type 1s. I did a ton of them. When I we can talk about me building engines in a barracks room when I was a Marine in California and selling them at the Pomona swap meet. I mean, I've got crazy stories about working inside dumpsters and wild stuff, building engines in laundry rooms in the barracks. I was a barracks manager, so I knew where all the empty rooms were. So I had a couple of extra rooms I turned into engine shops in a Marine Corps barracks. I'd probably still be in Leavenworth if I got caught doing that. Luckily, the statute of limitations are up, so I can talk about it. But at the end of the day, you know, the Type 4 came along really after I got out of the Marine Corps. So it was a funny thing. So I get out of the Marine Corps, I start the shop back up. While I was in, I didn't spend any money. I worked my tail off. I got all my food for free. I got free housing. I had a pickup truck and a sand rail. I worked on cars in the parking lot. I built engines in the barracks room. Sometimes I go to the Pomona swap meet and make $15,000 in a single day. I saved every bit of that. I came home with $100,000 or whatever in cash, and I started the shop or started the shop back up. It did it better than I ever could have had I not went in the Marine Corps because I didn't have to spend any money, right? I started up, and my roommate who I had in the Marine Corps, he also was a Volkswagen guy. And so he actually got into the Type 4 stuff hot and heavy in the conversion stuff before I did. And he had met up with a guy named Joe LaCicero, okay, at Oregon Performance Products. Now, Joe is the guy that created my DTM cooling system. So this is where part of the history kind of really starts. So my ex-roommate, Adam, he was doing the Type 4 thing. I was already building a lot of engines. I got out of the Marine Corps before he did. And when he got out, he was also from Georgia. So he came and we were roommates in at my house, that was on the shop property, and while he was getting back on his feet type thing. So he was working for me, and he built a couple of Type 4s, and I'd done some bus motors and stuff like that. So I'd also built a few performance Type 4s while I was in the Marine Corps, quite a few actually, for sand dragsters, off-road guys, that sort of thing. And I knew the guys at Chemco really well back when Chemco was huge, and I love those guys. Ron Silva and Danny, all those guys were freaking epic. I'm still friends with them today. And they taught me a lot. They're older than I am, and they taught me a lot. I mean, Ron taught me how to do valve train geometry when I was a Marine. And so the Type 4 thing, I had to get warmed up to it a little bit. I had to see what some of these big ones would do. And then I built a 2270, and it was really awesome. And then I started talking to Joe LaCicero, and this is about the time that the internet actually came along. This is like 97. So that's when, www was like, what the hell is that, So
Dial up.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes you forever to send an email, especially where we were.
Somebody pick up the phone, you lose your connection.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I started emailing with Joe, and he kind of took me under his wing because he hand built all the DTM cooling systems, and he had it all worked out, and it was easy and straightforward. It looked pretty cool. It worked really well, and he had never put them on huge engines, but I did. I started putting them on huge, 3 liters and stuff like that. And so this is, again, the internet's just starting up. Shop Talk forums, which is still around, just started up. And so Joe got on there. I got on there. And that's really when the Type 4 thing just flourished. And at that time, I pretty much stopped building Type 1s. I would still build a couple, but I really, until I built the engine for Eric, the president of the Vintage Volkswagen Club, I had not built a Type 1 in 2 decades, other than one for myself, because I just said, I'm going to do Type 4 stuff, and that's it, and I specialized in it, and I came up with my own combinations, and sometimes that would mean that I'm going to take apart an engine every day and put it back together again for a whole month and change 30 cams and put it on the dyno every day and see what cams do what, change the heads and all that sort of thing. And so I did that, and I just had crazy results from sometimes just a cam change. So, but that's really what got that going. And then we can talk about this a little later, but Joe also knew a guy named Shad Laws, and he was at the time the L in LN Engineering before that was a company. Okay, so that was when it was two college kids. They were a few years younger than me. Shad Laws and Charles Navarro. That's the L and the N in LN. Shad left and went to work with F1 teams and stuff in Europe for a while. But long story short, that's kind of what started that, because Shad had been talking to Joe at Oregon Performance, and Joe was like, "Hey, you guys need to link up." So they had the idea to do the Nicosil cylinders for their college project at Northwestern, and I'm like, "Hey, those Nicosil cylinders don't just need to be a college project; they need to be a product. I will be your first customer," and I was. And the first set of cylinders they made are still alive on my 356 engine, which is a Type 4 and a 64C 356.
Wow.
So that's kind of the whole tie together there. And then Joe passed away in 2002, July 4th, 2002. And then it took me a year to get the DTM cooling system stuff from his family, and I've been building them ever since. Actually, David Wiley at Creative Carcraft makes the fiberglass pieces, and he's done that since he purchased Creative Carcraft from Skip way back in the day. So there's just tons and tons and tons of history with all this stuff. It's all linked together, you know?
So cool. And I was so like just interested looking at everything on your website and just looking at all the history and then talking to you a few times. I'm like, man, this is going to make such an amazing episode for this community to just kind of, sit back and listen to this. Let's talk about this IMS bearing flaw, because I know, you obviously found the fix for this, but when did you realize that this bearing flaw needed a real fix?
My time with water cooled Porsches, like forever, like I didn't own a car with a radiator. I had a '85 Chevy pickup truck that I used to tow trailers with. Other than that, everything I owned was air cooled, single cabs, double cabs, Beetles, a 912, a 914. Everything was air cooled, strictly air cooled. I didn't even know about working on a car with a radiator for a long time. And then going back to 1997, I met a guy at a golf course where I had a part-time job, Coto de Casa, down at Mission Viejo, California. And he was the inventor of ABS plastic. And he bought one of the first Boxsters ever come into the country. And I was able to see that car and be around it. It was like one of the first ones ever brought in. And at that point, I was like, okay, water cooled, 6-cylinder, don't sound right to me, but whatever. So little did I know where this would go. So for several years after that, after I got things going, after Charles at LN Engineering was doing what he was doing, he would travel to a lot of the Porsche shows and stuff like that. I'm one that stays home. I stay in the zone. I don't care about events. I just stay in the zone. So there's a guy by the name of Bruce Anderson, and Bruce wrote the 911 Performance Handbook. He was the tech editor for Excellence Magazine, Panorama. Bruce was just endless levels of knowledge. He's passed away now, but it was just endless. And he was also a Marine. And so one day, Charles was at the literature meet, the Porsche literature meet in LA. Huge event every year. Everybody goes there except for me. And so Charles was there, and Bruce walked up to him and he said, "Look, there's a problem that you and Jake need to know about." He said, "What's that?" He was like, "There's a bearing in these new modern engines that's failing. I get letters all the time written to me, letter to the tech editor. My 911 engine blew up. This bearing failed. My Boxster engine blew up. This bearing failed." He couldn't publicize them because of his clout, what he was doing. He couldn't say anything about it. But he said, "Look, there's a major problem and nobody knows about it, but it's going to be huge. And you guys need to figure out what's causing it. And you need to be at the ground level with it because you're young enough to be able to live this out and have a good return from it." So that was true insider information. And that's what Marines do for each other, right? We do that no matter what. So we listened. I immediately bought a Boxster. Charles immediately bought a Boxster, and we started taking it apart and learning about it. So the very first night that I took one of those engines apart, I looked at the bearing, which is a 6204 GM alternator ball bearing, basically, that fails in a GM alternator, and it's sealed. I looked at it and I said, anybody that would believe this is going to work is an idiot. I mean, why do you put a sealed ball bearing inside of an engine where it has hot engine oil around it that's just going to wick by the seal and wash the grease out, which is what it does. So that very night, the first night that I did it, I invented the IMS solution, which is a plain bearing that works like the Metzger air-cooled Porsche engine, the engine that was the predecessor to this water-cooled engine, the M96. And basically, all we did was rob the geometry from what Porsche had done with the predecessor engine, and then spent a lot of time developing materials, oil flow, dynamics, all that sort of thing. Total trial and error done in Appalachia, made on manual machines, one of which I still have. And we made the prototypes, started the patent process. And so the whole thing was not just making a part, because people don't realize it. A patent is not for a product. A patent is for this. It's this real estate right here. It's the intellectual property. It's the novel concepts. So a product, well, you could have 100 products originate from one patent. So we were able to secure 5 patents for this tooling and all the stuff that we used to do this with, the process, the tooling, the method of oil flow, the method of support. But basically, I came up with several ways to get rid of that bearing problem, because what you learn as an inventor, and that's what I always wanted to be my entire life. People are like, what did you want to do? I want to be an inventor. My grandfather was an inventor. That's, to me, that's what I always wanted to be. It's what I wanted to do. And having that title trumps anything to me. Like, I'd rather be an inventor of something as be a PhD or a doctor in something. That's just me. So we were able to patent the good ideas. And one thing that I learned was you also need to patent the bad ideas, because if you don't, somebody's going to come up with that idea and think that it's an okay idea, and they're going to become your competitor. So anybody out there listening, if you have an invention idea, don't stop with your invention. You need to go on and you need to cover your tracks, and you need to invent the thing that might be your competition later down the road. So keep those novel concepts in the back of your mind. So ultimately, there's different price points on all that, but it literally, 11 years of Boxster, Cayman, 911, except for the GT cars. The GT cars and the turbo cars kept the predecessor engine. They kept the Metzger engine. It was a water-cooled version of the air-cooled flat 6, and it had a plain bearing in it still. My bearing was plain. So ultimately, people can say, well, you robbed that idea. I robbed the diameter of something. The diameter of my solution bushing is the same as what the factory used. Other than that, it's not the same thing. And the U.S. Patent Office says that it was an infringement on what had been done before. Otherwise, they would not have issued my patents. And that's a pain in the neck to do that. It takes years, and it costs a lot of money. So ultimately, we omit that bearing. We get that bearing out of the equation, and we do it with the engine still in the car. So I had to create a process and the tools. I made the first tools out of a pile of junk and $12 worth of stuff from the Ace Hardware store in Cleveland, Georgia. So, and it's just funny how, I'm a proud American. I'm a Marine at the end of the day. And I'm like, this is remade in America. The Germans created this, and the Germans created the problem, and the Americans solved it.
Speaking of solved it, how's it feel knowing that you saved an entire generation of Porsche engines?
Well, I mean, I think that I don't even think about it. To me, I was just doing what I was put on this planet to do. It's I think if people hold themselves in a certain kind of regard, they get on cruise control and they stop doing other things. To me, I was like, okay, I did this, I did that, I got the patent. Okay, that's done. Turning that off. Next thing, next thing, next thing. That's that laser hyper focus that we learn as Marines. So, I mean, yeah, it makes me feel good, but at the end of the day, that's why I was put here. I was put here to solve problems.
We've talked a couple times, and just through regular conversation, I've kind of unpacked that you're never leaving Georgia. You don't care about the shows and that's not your life. You'll never move to California, but why is that a non-negotiable?
I'm way too Southern for one. So I've got 100. I own 120 acres in the middle of nowhere, 5 miles down a dirt road. I can go there and stay for a week and never see or hear a human. I might hear a helicopter, maybe going to the Army base that's not that far away. I mean, as a Marine, I was in Southern California. And trust me, as a Marine, when you're 18, 19 years old, oh my goodness, Southern California for a Volkswagen or Porsche person is the Mecca, especially back then in the early 90s.
Right.
But man, I couldn't get out of there quick enough. As a Marine, once I was done, I stopped at the state line. I looked back and I said, I'm not ever coming back to this place. And I didn't go back for like 18 years. I just don't like all the people. I don't like the hustle and bustle and how fast everything is. I mean, but there are other parts of California that are beautiful, and you go up to Eureka in the mountains, and it's just like it is here. But still, that state's just way too regulated for me. I'm way too rogue for regulations like that. Because I grew up in Appalachia. So we're on our own program. We take care of ourselves. We do what we want to do. We don't care about regulation. Leave me alone, I leave you alone, type thing. But no, I mean, I don't need to be in California. When I came home, I had a moving truck that had 2 Carmen Gias in it. Okay, they were sitting on mattresses that were thrown away out of the barracks, and I had to give a couple of 6-packs of beer to some Marines to help me load all this stuff in my U-Haul truck. But I had two Carmen Gias sitting in this U-Haul truck, and I had mattresses between them, of all things. One was flipped upside down and was on its roof, sitting on mattresses. So I come home and I'm unloading all my stuff, and my dad, of course, in his infinite wisdom, he comes walking up, and it's like 2:00 in the morning. And again, he comes at me. So what are you going to do? Well, we had this rental house on the property. It was right next to the shop, and there was nobody living in it. That's where I was going to move into. And he gave me the whole spiel about, you better not be late on your rent, blah, blah, blah. This is going to be hard for you. The Marine Corps is not nearly as hard as I am. Totally, I agree with that. And then he says, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, there's this thing called the internet. I think that I can take what I've learned, I can build some engines, and I can do it right here, and I can sell these things on the internet. And he says, you mean to tell me that somebody in some other state or some other country or whatever is going to buy a motor for their car from a kid working in a barn in Cleveland, Georgia? I said, well, I think so. Well, 2 years later, he is working for me, answering telephones and talking to people ordering engines in Australia.
Dang.
And Singapore. The first one I sold internationally was in Singapore. That was the very first one I sold internationally. Now I've got, I think, about 300 international. And today, actually, I do more international work with Aircooled stuff than I do domestic work. Sitting here looking at 9 builds that are on the board, and of those 9, 4 of them actually go out of the country.
Dang, man. That's almost half.
Yeah, and sometimes it's actually more than half that go out of the country.
So fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about this experience that you had on the Speed Channel. Was that the blow it up?
That's one of the few times I've lost in my life, and it was great because I was able to lose to another Marine.
Let's talk about what went wrong.
So, well, it didn't go wrong. It went the way it was supposed to go, and so I met a guy that did podcasting stuff. This was like 06, 07, before podcasts were a thing. I actually had the Fourth Dimension radio show going back to 07, which was when iTunes first came out. We were like in the iTunes top 100 when it first came out. Kind of crazy stuff, but I loved doing that podcast before a podcast was a podcast. And so I met a guy who ended up getting a job working for Rich Christensen, the guy that did Pinks. So Pinks ended up, he wanted to do more shows through Speed Channel, and Speed Channel was a thing. And they said, hey, we're going to do some pilots, and one of them's called Blow It Up. And I'm like, well, this sounds good, because I used to do engine blow contests at car shows, and I would do it for charity, and we would blow things up on purpose to see how long it would take for them to blow up. And, in Sevierville, Tennessee, one time I built an engine blindfolded in front of the crowd, whole engine. We blew it up, built one out with just a pair of pliers, no tools, just pliers. And it lasted for 5 minutes at wide open throttle. So that was right up my alley. So I'm like, okay, who am I going up against? So he goes, well, there's different people, but some of them decided they're going to bail. And he goes, I don't know who you can go up against. I said, well, how about Art Thrain from Aircooled Engineering? Art was out in Salt Lake City, and he was also a Marine. And I said, look, I would love to go up against Art, because it's going to be, he's super sharp. He's a super good guy. He and I had shot some video stuff together. He's also a Marine. He also worked on and flew in the same helicopters I did, just about 12 years older than me. So it was very much a big competition between two very good friends that are wired the same. So we show up at this event, And the organization level was horrible. Anytime somebody asks you to be on TV, slap them. Don't do it. Slap them because you'll be on TV and blah, blah, blah. No, what you have to realize is you're giving them your content for free. They should be paying you to go on television. So, we show up there and the rules were basically you got to run the car till it blows up. It can't have a rev limiter. It's got to run on pump gas. Basically, those are the biggest rules. So we build our car to the rules. Okay. Art builds his car to the rules. Then we show up, and since nobody else built their car to the rules, then they changed the rules because otherwise they weren't going to have a show. So we only had pump gas with us. But then they said, well, now you can turn you can turn a rev limiter on and, blah, blah, blah. So Muffler Mike Sheldon was the driver of the car. He was obviously a great drag racer. I'm not a drag racer. So we flew Mike in to come drive the car. He knew Art also, but Mike had never driven the car. And it was a 550 Spider replica of all things for the drag strip. And so we built the whole car in like a month, which is what they want you to do. They want you to thrash and build this thing against the clock. And that was really what turned me against the clock, right? And so we end up doing this thing. They changed all the rules. And I don't want to be a sore loser because we lost. Art kicked our ass. I'll tell you right now. And I love to lose to a Marine. But we were a victim of ourselves because we listened to what they said, and I was not smart enough at the time to think that things could change. If I could have thought it was going to change, if I would have thought ahead and didn't have to drive to Iowa, I would have been like, okay, let's take some race gas. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's get a different tune. It was fuel injected too, programmable fuel injection. Let me make another map that's a safe map that I can throw in this thing really quick. I didn't do any of that because I thought I was going up against Art. But when we get there, we end up racing other people too, with other kind of cars. So I learned a lot, but we lost. I mean, hands down, we lost. But Art and I laugh about it now. But anytime the television or some level of media like that's involved in something, it's going to be a disaster. They're a total disorganization. It makes me laugh every time I see somebody message me, "Hey, I'm with so and so show." I'm like, delete. I'm not even talking to you.
I have only a tiny thing that I can say about that from the late 90s, early 2000, when reality TV shows like first really kind of started to come out. There was a show on Fox called Paradise Hotel, early 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember that, yeah.
I made the lead cast, and I got flown out to Vegas and then LA, and it was a total shit show. I thought it was going to be what they said. You're going to go out to this, hotel location, and it's going to be all this, this crazy hooking up and all this partying and all this stuff. And you get there, and it's this total production, and there's lines, and there's, who can act crazy, camera, and all that. And I'm like, man, this is all fake stuff. But anyway, I'm not taking away from you. I'm just saying I relate to that, and since then I've always felt, forget that. Like, being on TV and stuff is overrated.
Especially now, I mean, to me, TV's just washed away with all the podcasts and all the YouTube stuff and the social media people that have more followers than television shows have. It's gone. It may as well be it's like the Polaroid camera,
So you've designed the Technical Learning Center now for middle schoolers at Prince Avenue Christian School. And I know you've been working with your daughter on this since she was 6. What an absolutely cool thing to do, because we were talking a few minutes ago about how schools really don't even have shop class anymore. So now there's a Technical Learning Center for middle schoolers. Tell me what sparked that idea.
Well, so my daughter years ago, my wife and I bought an old go-kart for all of my daughter's cousins before my daughter was born. So we were the last of my wife's siblings to have a kid. So we bought them all this go-kart, and everybody drove it. The oil was never changed. It was just ran into the ground. And by the time it got passed down to my daughter, the motor was shot. So for Christmas, when she was 5, I said, look, I bought her like a Harbor Freight motor. And I said, we'll put that on the go-kart because we live in the country. I mean, I got a 20-acre field out here we can ride around in and stuff, and it's awesome. So I said, there's a caveat. for you to put this on the go-kart, you've got to take it apart. You got to put it back together again. And we're going to name all the parts and we're going to learn what it is and how it works. And she said, okay. So we do it. And she was into it. I got videos of her 5 years old, just into it. And she was all about the organization of it. Every tool labeled, every part labeled. She would bag and tag everything. It was epic. So, so it's like you could tell she's my offspring. So that night, like she gets out of the bath or whatever, and she's like, I had an idea. I was like, what's that? She goes, why don't we do this for other kids? And I was like, ding, ding, ding. Okay. So we had to put the engine back together again and we cranked it up. I said, okay, so what we need to do if you want to do that is we need to take it back apart, make a list of everything that we need, and we will make a kit that's a learning experience. So a kid can do this at home with their parents so they can do it at school. And that's what we did. So we put all the tools in one room and we put the engine in another room, which is now my machine shop. And we basically put that engine back together again, and she would go get tools as we needed them, but they stayed in that room. And she would take them and put them on the stainless steel tabletop and label what they were. So that way, every tool we needed to take this thing apart, put it back together again was known. So we did that, made the parts list, made the tool list, made the spare parts list, and then we did an instructional video about how to do it. And then her school is ran by also a Marine colonel, and it's a private Christian school. And so I brought the idea up to him. I said, hey, Colonel Hathaway, what do you think about what Ava and I were able to do? He's like, can you come meet with my team in a couple of weeks and bring one of these engines with you? And I said, yeah. So we go meet with a few teachers and him. And one of the teachers there was actually a retired Air Force test pilot. He was the B-1 bomber test pilot. He is also a test pilot of the SR-71 Blackbird. Cool. And he retired. This guy's over 70 years old at the time, and he's teaching high school kids. And his degree was in astrophysicism, right? I mean, literally, the dude was flying SR-71s, and he's teaching high school and middle school kids.
That's somebody that you can't say to him, come on, man, what is this, rocket science?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but he was so humble, but he was just super. The things a man has seen are just unbelievable. So,
sure.
So he was blown away by it. So the school adopted it, and they said, "We'll buy some of these kits from you." I gave them a good deal. Then COVID hit, and that threw everything off. So it was just like no school or whatever. Everything was jacked up. So finally, in 2023, actually the summer of 22, he got a hold of me, the colonel did, and said, hey, we want to pick this back up. We've added a life skills class, and we think this is an essential life skill for people to learn how to use tools and things. Wow. So it'll be a 7th grade class. We want to pick this back up. So they bought 8 of the technical learning centers, and then I instructed the class. And originally I was going to teach another teacher how to do it, but then we learned that that's probably not going to work. So every year I volunteered my time to go teach this class for a month, and I love doing it. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, you talk about these kids today and how they're not learning, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. I'm here to tell you, I'm probably going to piss people off by saying this. It is the parents' fault.
Hey, you ain't going to piss nobody off. Listen, they better be able to take that.
This is the thing. I'll tell you right now, these kids are absolutely hungry for this. They get addicted to this. I had kids in my class that went home and took their bicycle apart. They never would have done it, right? I had parents walk up to me in the parking lot and just blown away. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you're giving your time for this. I can't believe my kid's so into this. My kid don't want to go play golf anymore. My kid wants to build a go-kart. Wow. I mean, so I'm telling you, the kids are hungry for this. You know why? Because it's so different for them now. This is different. It's challenging. People don't know about it. And I think that the generation of parents we have right now are basically a result of their parents not teaching them anything. And I think that generation is the one that's really leading the big problem with this. But the kids that are now, middle school age and high school age, they're dying for this. I've got a kid that's working for me right now as an intern. He's a 2nd year in engineering school. He's never touched a CNC machine. He's never modeled anything. He's never programmed anything. But he's downstairs with me working with a 5-axis Haas UMC. And and literally he knows more than his teachers do. The
Wow,
teachers
man.
never touched a CNC machine before.
Incredible.
So ultimately, that's what I'm getting at. But that's what the mechanical classroom is all about. So basically, we talked about, there's no shop classes anymore. Well, they
Yeah.
pulled all of it out. Everybody's forced to go to college.
Sure.
You're a peon if you don't go to college.
Right.
You're never going to be amount to anything if you don't go to college. Well, I'll tell you, I've had a lot of people with degrees work for me. And I graduated from special ed in high school. I'm lucky to have graduated. If I hadn't had shop classes, I never would have graduated. So, ultimately, what I'm getting at is this mechanical classroom rolls 8 of these kits or however many into a classroom. You put 2 or 3 students at this. We can literally transfer a science classroom or a math classroom into a mechanical classroom in 15 minutes. Every part of it. You roll in with the kits. The kits are 100% self-contained. They have a hydraulic lift that lifts the engine up. So if the kid's short, no big deal. If the kid's tall, no big deal. Everything is labeled. Every tool is etched. Everything has a location, just like it does as a Marine when you're working on aircraft.
Yeah, yeah.
And I could say, take the tool out of location B3. We don't have to say what the tool is. Pull that tool out of location B3. They all end up with a tool in their hand. Now, let's learn what this tool is. Okay, now tomorrow, you don't know it, but when you come in, we're going to have a test over what tools are in this box. I want you to memorize the location and the size of everything in the box, because it's not about putting an engine together. It's about being a student of your craft. Whatever that is, you are a student of that craft. If you know how to use a tool, if you know how things go together, if you learn how to diagnose things, that's what it's all about. It's not about being an engine builder. It's not about being a mechanic. It's about being a student of whatever craft that you're going to work with. So when we took these engines apart, I used different methods of doing this. Sometimes it was a video. A lot of times it was me in front of the class with my own engine with a video camera on it that was being displayed big on a screen, and it was me doing the work, and I'm walking the kid through. This is the camshaft. The purpose of the camshaft is to actuate the valves at certain times and certain amounts of valve lift. Valve lift is defined as blah, blah, blah. And then we would put that engine all back together again, and then they got to fire that engine up. And we rolled them right outside of a literature room and fired these things up right outside and made the teacher mad.
So cool, though, man. So cool. Tell me,
So
any consistencies in what these kids are maybe talking about or learning? Like, what's the first thing that these kids in middle school realize when they tear an engine down?
they realize, one, that it's complex, and two, that it's simple. But I'm telling you, the look on these kids' faces, and I got some video I can share with you. The look on their faces when this thing cranks up, because you took it all apart, right? You took it all apart and you crank it up, and then we learn what propels a car. These kids were able to go home and tell their parent how the car that they drove to school in worked. The parent doesn't know. The grandparent doesn't know, but this kid knows. And they learned this very enthusiastically also. But, we crank it up, and even I taught them, look, there's no second chances here. Either your engine runs or it doesn't. If you do everything the way that I show you, your engine will run. If it doesn't run, you fail. And there's no do-overs. There's no second chances. This is very much so real. And that's, to me, what the cool thing about it was, is because there was no simulation. There was no button pushing. It was like, we're going to crank this thing up. If you did what you're supposed to do, it'll run. So I cheated a little bit. And the day we were going to crank them all up, I pushed them out the back door and tried to fire them all up. One of them wouldn't run. Well, of course, those were my troublemaker kids, but those troublemaker kids, one of them's going to end up ruling the whole lot of everybody else, because he don't want to be there, but he when he gets out in the real world, he'll just take it by the horns.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, they had dropped a spark plug, and it closed the gap up on it. So I'm trying to crank it up. It wouldn't crank. I hit it with a little bit of ether, still didn't crank. I said, okay, it's got to be ignition. I checked it. It had spark. I said, okay, it must be the spark plug. I pulled the spark plug out. Gap's closed. Okay. So I always had a bunch of spare parts. I put another spark plug in it, cranked it up, made sure it ran. Then I put their spark plug back in it. So everybody goes down through the line. They're cranking their motors up. They're all cranking up. And I saved those guys for last, knowing theirs was not going to crank. Everybody's cheering, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden they start pulling it. Everybody else has cranked on like the first pull because I would cheat a little bit. I put a little bit of gas in the spark plug hole so it would bust right off on the first pull.
Right.
So we get to these guys, it won't run. And they're like, what's going on? I said, okay, now it's time to learn. Let's think about how this thing operates. It's intake, compression, power, and exhaust, right? We learned this, okay? So we crank it up, we turn it. Yep, it's got good compression. It's got spark. Okay, what's it not got? It's not running. We got spark to the plug, but we know it's not running. Maybe the plug's bad. We pull it out, and I was like, oh, who here dropped the spark plug and did not have the integrity to tell me, right? Well, nobody ever told me. So I had a spark plug in my back pocket, threw it in there, and it cranked up. But, that is how real I made it for these kids. And they absolutely loved it. And so I'm doing it again. I'll be teaching that class in March of 26 to 24 more 7th graders.
Awesome, man. That really is so cool that you do that. Bring that back into the youth. We talk about the Volkswagen community as a whole, these master craftsmen, master technician, master mechanic guys that worked on air-cooled engines for a long time are either too old now, or they're dying off. And, it sucks because there's not a lot of youth that seems like they're interested until something like this, right? Some innovative type thing. We go back, history always repeats itself. I feel awesome knowing that these kids are excited about this. And, man, that's just cool. It really is.
Well, I look around the industry and I look at, I just turned 50, but I look around and I'm like, I'm one of the youngest people in this industry.
Yeah.
That's a leader, right? There's
Right.
there's some people that are up and coming, but most everybody is at 65, 70, 75, 80, and they're still out there getting it, right? A lot of them are still building stuff. But ultimately, there's just not a lot of new, fresh blood coming into it. And you see it at events too, and you almost look at it like sometimes, you almost wonder where cars are going to go.
Right.
And you look at it like, I'm a 356 guy, and I look at a 356, and I've got one, but I'm the youngest person I know that has a 356. Everybody's got gray hair, right? And I look at that like, is a 356 going to end up being a Model T or a Model A, where it's old and it's cool, but it has no following really, Younger people just aren't going to go for it. So, and to your point about people getting older and all that, so I literally have a 57 pre-A 356 sitting downstairs right now that was bought by a customer of mine, a longtime customer of mine, and I was building an engine for him for the car. He bought it at one of the Monterey auctions with no engine. He commissioned me to build an engine for it. I've done many for him. And he called me up and he was just disgusted. Jake, I'm done. Don't bother finishing the motor. If I owe you some money, I'll pay you. But I can't find anybody to do anything to this car. Everybody has always done my mechanic work or my transmission work or my paint work. They've all retired. They're sick. They don't want to work. I'm fed up. I'm not doing anything with it. So I helped him sell that car to another one of my customers, who's my daughter's surgeon, who saved her foot last year because she's born with spina bifida, and he's been her surgeon for 13 years. So I hooked him up with this car, and now we're building a 2.8 liter Type 4 for it. But literally, there's projects that are not getting done because you can't find anybody to do the work.
I feel that. I understand.
And then on the flip side of things, and this is probably you may have some sponsors out there or people that are deep in this industry that are not going to like what I've got to say about this. And I don't really care. Last time I checked, I'm still a Marine. We don't care what people think. But at the end of the day, what's killing this industry now is private equity. The entire automotive aftermarket industry is being killed day by day by private equity groups that are buying out what's left of the good guys. And what they do is they come in, like a shop like mine's perfect, right? They come in, it's got a great reputation. You can't find anything bad about them. True craftsmanship has run this place. They've built an awesome reputation. They have awesome character. They have awesome customers. And I would be a target, and I've had them contact me before, but I won't talk to them. And so ultimately they come in, they want to buy that reputation. They want to pay you a lot of money to stay there for a while and be the face of it.
Right.
They come in and they optimize your books, and they kill your business. They come in, they bring other people, you get rid of your good people, they cost too much to be there, they would rather hire somebody that doesn't have a clue, and then they start learning how to make the numbers look better. And the sad part about it, that sucks the most, is they believe that they are coming in and they are making that company better because it looks better on paper.
They dissolve the culture.
They have absolutely killed it. So it's happened to almost all of your well-known brands, right? It's happened to well-known auction sites. It's happened to all these grassroots endeavors where people truly build things, and these people with big wallets and small minds come in and they want a piece of it. And a lot of them are car guys. That's the reason why they target car people, is because they want to be able to, own a company or be invested in a company that makes this because they like Porsches or they like Volkswagens. And it's absolutely ruined it. If you look around, like the Holley Group, people that own Holley, I mean, look at how many brands that owns. So what they do is they go in, they buy up a bunch of different brands, and then they put them all together and they sell all that. So I met a guy. My daughter was at a drag race school, Roy Hill's drag race school, before her spina bifida started giving her a hard time. She was racing a junior dragster. So we're there at a class, and a guy's there who is he's the head of a major private equity group. And let me tell you about the audacity of this guy. We're sitting in a room with all these drag racers, one of which is Big Daddy Don Garlits.
Hey,
he is in there. Okay, he's in there to have his license renewed. My daughter has staged next to Big Daddy in her junior dragster. He signed her dragster. He's an awesome guy.
That museum's here in Florida.
Oh yeah, we're sitting in that room. Everybody goes around telling who they are, whatever. It comes up to this guy that's a head of a private equity group. He does not know how a 4-stroke engine operates, okay? He has the audacity to say, I have won more races than anybody in this room because I own all of these companies that make all the parts for the cars that win races. And the guy's in a room with Don Garlits.
Not how it works, pal.
I wanted to get up and go slap this dude.
Yeah.
Right? I really did. So after that, I was like, I want to get in this guy's brain a little bit. So between rounds, I start talking to him, and he was having problems with bearings and his blower going bad. And I'm like, I know about bearings. I could create a fix for that. And of course, he says, how expensive are they? Right? He has 800 employees across 40 different companies that he's bought up, but he's worried about how much I'm going to charge him for a blower bearing. And I'm like, dude, you better be telling me that you don't care what it costs because you want to fix it
That's right.
Right? So anyway, he had just sold all these companies at that time, and he's like, I could tell the economy is going to go down. I've been doing this a long time. I just sold all of this. No telling how much money he made. No, more power to him. But he bought these companies piece by piece, one by one by one, and he would buy competing companies, right? And we've seen that with tire stores. Like my local tire store, they all ended up being tire discounters. They would go to the hometown tire company, they go to this other tire company, they buy both of them, and then they make the prices all the same. They eliminate all the competition. Yeah. And that's what they want to do. So ultimately, it is working to kill this industry. And they make it it tastes good to people like me. You work your ass off. The main thing that you don't want to deal with is you don't want to deal with humans. You don't want complaints. You don't want to deal with the public. So they come in and say, hey, you sit back, you make the parts, you make the engines, we'll handle the business, we'll pay you a few $1,000,000 and you can retire. It sounds wonderful. And then they ruin everything you created.
The next conversation, we're going to get into your grandfather. We're going to get into inventing the oscillating gas engine. That was in 1912. We're going to get into the association he had with Ford, with Firestone, with Edison, how he worked alongside George Kingston on the Kingston carburetor. I think there was even something I remember about in the early 1900s, he created like the first mass teletext messaging type thing.
Yeah, the Raby potentiophone, the wireless potentiophone. So
yeah. So we'll get into all of that on the next episode, but you guys stay locked in because this is going to be awesome. And that's a wrap for this episode of DubLife Diaries. Thanks for riding along with us and diving into these incredible stories of the people in the dubs that drive their dreams. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe or hit that follow button so you never miss an adventure. Do you have a story to tell or know somebody else who's living the dub life? Awesome! Reach out to us. You can find us on all socials at DubLife Diaries, or shoot me an email. I'm not hard to find. DubLifeDiaries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep the engines humming and the wheels turning, and always follow the road that inspires you. This is Joe Person. I'm signing off. I'll catch you on the next ride.